Despite 9 different generations in the series, many fans always come back to one generation of Pokémon games. Generation 2. Generation 2 consisted of Pokémon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. These were sequels to the world-changing games, Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Gold and Silver were eventually remade in the 4th generation of Pokémon with Pokémon Heartgold and Soulsilver. These were faithful remakes with quality of life improvements. Heartgold and Soulsilver became many Pokémon fans' favorite title. Many believe Pokémon has yet to surpass these two remakes. I played these games a few years after they came out, and I enjoyed them, but I still preferred the definitive version of Pokémon Gold and Silver. Pokémon Crystal for the Game Boy Color from 2001, and to this day Pokémon Crystal is still my all-time favorite Pokémon game and one of my favorite games of all time. And despite Heartgold and Soulsilver being close replicas of Crystal, they just don't rank as high. This is why I personally prefer Pokémon Crystal to Heartgold and Soulsilver. Just a few preemptive warnings to reduce unnecessary comments. First off, nostalgia plays a heavy role in this, although I have some genuine points that aren't fueled by nostalgia as to why I think Crystal is better, so stick around for those. Secondly, I'm going to refer to Heartgold and Soulsilver as just Heartgold from here on out because they're essentially the same game and it's infinitely easier to say. And finally, both Pokemon Heartgold and Crystal are amazing games. Just because I'm saying Heartgold doesn't hold up as much to me personally does not mean it's a bad game. It's still like a top 5 Pokemon game in my eyes. This entire video is just really nitpicky, but the Johto games mean a lot to me, so I want to be nitpicky and I want to make this. I want to sound like an elitist, but I'm not an elitist. I like Sword and Shield. Near the beginning of 2022, I began a playthrough where I played through both Pokemon Crystal and Pokemon Heartgold side by side to spot every little difference in the games. I simply did this because when I played Soulsilver about 10 years ago, it didn't resonate with me as hard as the original Generation 2 games did. So I wanted to find out why. I picked Heartgold out of the two because I had previously only played Soulsilver and mainly played Silver as a kid, so I wanted to get in on the Gold action. And now I'm a certified Gold digger. Playing both of these games together was a really neat experience, but I would not recommend it because damn, the Kanto half of the game is really just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over again, and doing it twice? Not fun. So because I wrote notes as I went along, I'm going to tackle this chronologically. So let's start with my first point. Something that really breaks my heart. The erasure of Chris. In Pokemon Crystal, the Pokemon developers Game Freak added a revolutionary option. You can be a girl. Oh my god! Wild, right? The female protagonist of Crystal was Chris. She is an icon. She is the moment. She is everything. At least to me. Obviously not to Game Freak because they replaced her with a different female protagonist, Lyra. Lyra is fine. She's neat. I really don't like that her hat is the size of the moon, but besides that, she's fine. But the omission of Chris is baffling. I've tried to find why they chose to use Lyra over Chris, but I came up empty. My guess, which is based on a Reddit post, is that Chris represents Crystal, and they needed somebody to represent Silver, since Ethan represented Gold. I guess that's an acceptable answer, but I will always love Chris more than any other protagonist in the series. Like, I just dig her outfit, her wild hairstyle, the 90s as heck getup. It screams Pokemon to me. I like her so much that I actually downloaded Pokemon Master Sex just to summon for her and her eventual beautiful alt. Literally the prettiest Pokemon character ever. So, not gonna lie, not having Chris as an option really started me off on a bad foot with the remakes. But it's okay, it's fine. I'm adaptable. At least that's what my resume says. So we get into New Bark Town, cry a little because it's so comfy and nostalgic, and our rival Silver is just chilling by the lab, and then bam! In Heartgold, there's a second rival. Game Freak looked at us and said, "I think you guys need a friend." And I looked right back at them and I said, "No we don't." I'm not against friendly rivals. I liked Hop, I liked How, kind of. They work well, but this felt wholly unnecessary. Lyra or Ethan, whichever is your rival in the game, is just bland, boring, uninteresting, and many other words that are synonyms to dull. Anyway, besides a more hand-holdy tutorial in Heartgold, it's relatively the same to Crystal for a while. They both play roughly the same. Whenever I talk to people about liking Crystal over the remakes, one of the most common responses I get is, "But the remakes are faster." And yeah, technically I guess they are, but this is actually a fairly interesting tidbit. This is me kind of defending Crystal. The walking speed in Heartgold is the same as Crystal's walk speed, and Heartgold's run speed is double the speed of the walking. So Heartgold's running is double the speed of Crystal's walk. But Crystal's walking never felt as agonizingly slow as Heartgold's walking speed. And that's because Johto is actually roughly at least 1.5 times bigger in Heartgold compared to Crystal. Because if they did a complete one-to-one reimagining of the grid, then running would be insane. The player wouldn't get in as many battles, thus the historic unbalance of Generation 2 would be even worse. So in reality, Heartgold's running speed is only about 1.25 to 1.5 times faster than Crystal's walk speed. It's not as drastic of a difference as one would think. I find it very interesting. But when it comes to battles, the shifting and the sending out Pokémon is faster in Heartgold. But the actual animations, for the most part, are faster in Crystal. And you know one thing that's definitely slower in Heartgold? The slow HP bars that was a staple in Generation 4 for whatever reason. One could realistically watch an entire episode of Breaking Bad while waiting for a Gyarados to die from that super effective move he did. Back to the actual content. Things are mostly the same up until after the second gym in Azalea Town, home of one of the most banger Pokemon songs. The Ilex Forest. A nice little woodsy area, home to the Queen Celebi and the stupid Farfetch'd. In here, the player has to catch a Farfetch'd to get the cut HM. It's annoying, never liked it, not even in Crystal. But Heartgold said, "What if we made it worse?" In Heartgold, it's all about trying not to make noise and catching the Farfetch'd. I'd rather just get behind it and chase it back to its owner like you do in Crystal than do a stupid sound puzzle in Heartgold. I hate this section, why would they make it harder? I mean, they made a lot of things harder in the remake. But, like, why did they make Whitney harder? I don't know. I guess they wanted to give newer players some of that trauma the millennials experienced. That new National Park theme is delicious! Let's talk story. So the main plot of Johto has always been no plot. Yeah, there's a small Suicune story in Crystal, but that was super minor. And yeah, there's the Team Rocket nonsense, but that's also not very big and it's always quick and easy. It's supposed to be kind of pathetic. That's one of the aspects I've always loved about Gold, Silver, and Crystal. This is about the player's adventure. This isn't about saving the world. It's not about being the chosen one. The Team Rocket of the region isn't trying to end the world. It's about your adventure through the Pokemon League, exploring Johto, going out on your own. It's very slice of life, and I dig that. I dig that a lot. And that's a big reason why I really enjoyed Sword and Shield's story for the most part. It's not about saving the world. For the most part, Heartgold betrayed this. In Heartgold, there's a group of women, the Kimono Girls. In Crystal, the Kimono Girls just give the player the Surf HM after beating them. In the remake, they watch the player throughout their time in Johto because they're convinced that the player is the chosen one, the one who bonds well with Pokémon, the one who can confront the legendary Pokémon Ho-Oh or Lugia. Why did we need this? While it was cool, why did we need an entire hecking cutscene of Ho-Oh and Lugia coming down after a ceremonial dance? They took Crystal's slice of life and made it feel like all the other generations with its story. The chosen one, the legendary. I loved in Crystal that the player never had to catch Lugia or Ho-Oh. They were 100% optional. They were just found by the player. They don't need to be a chosen one, they're just being rewarded for exploring. I don't need this, I don't want this. Yes, the Suicune event exists in Crystal, and they talk about it being a legend, but that is optional. In Heartgold, you can't go to Kanto unless you encounter the legendaries. Why? Why? Shut the f*** up, Lyra. Just let me go on my Pokemon journey and catch and encounter whatever I want to catch and encounter. I remember when I first played this game in 2011, I complained to my friend about this, and he just laughed at me and said it was a dumb opinion. As you can tell, I have not let that go. Now, before jumping over to Kanto, I have one final note of Johto, and I just want to say I like complexity, but sometimes less complexity is okay. And I'm talking about Pokemon gyms. I'm pretty split on which gym design I prefer. Bugsy's Heartgold gym was not fun. Crystal's was infinitely better. Whitney's gym was better in Heartgold, easily. Morty's was so much cooler in Heartgold, all spooky and whatnot. Chuck's gym in Heartgold was such a vibe, but I still kind of prefer the simplicity of Crystal's. Price and Claire both had neat gyms in Heartgold, but I definitely prefer their Crystal layouts. At the end of the day, both variations of each gym are good, except Bugsy's in Heartgold. That's trash, that's absolute garbage. Anyway, after the 8 gyms, it's time for Victory Road. A lot of people criticize Gen 2's Victory Road because it's completely devoid of trainers, and if this was a giant 3-hour video essay talking about the themes of Pokemon Johto, I would go on about how thematically cool Victory Road is. But that's a different video. Elite Four is roughly the same, the champion is about the same, it's still Lance Bass of NSYNC, but do you know what's different? The credits. Do you know what Heartgold doesn't have? The Dancing Ditto. Hello? Why did you not recreate the Dancing Ditto in Heartgold? Cowards? And now we've made it to Kanto, everyone's favorite region according to sales data. The Kanto side is interesting because up until this point, I've preferred Crystal's soundtrack to Heartgold, but I feel quite the opposite on the Kanto side. So let's talk music, because it's good. Heartgold's soundtrack on the Johto side is still good, but it just feels inferior to me. Most routes just didn't hit the same as the Gameboy beeps and boops. It's mostly because the sound chip in the DS makes music sound like a muffled version of a song, and many of the tracks are a little bit too ambitious for their own good. Take Route 42 for example. Heartgold sounds good, but it obviously wants to be more grandiose. But it can't reach those heights on the hardware. But they tried anyway, and it's just not as good as Crystal's version, where they knew the limitations and worked within that box. There are some exceptions. I think a lot of the town themes are better in Heartgold. Violet City, Azalea Town, National Park? Actually, I don't know. I might like Crystal's version of National Park more. They're both so damn good. And honestly, almost all of Kanto's town themes. I say almost all because Pallet Town and Gameboy Sound Font will never be defeated. You know, according to me, the boy whose first game was Pokemon Blue. It's very nostalgic, okay? To praise another win of Heartgold is the super fitting and somber song for Cinnabar Island. In Crystal, they just reuse another town theme, but they made a completely original song for Cinnabar in Heartgold, and that's honestly like the biggest win for Heartgold, in my opinion. More on that later, though. The battle themes of Kanto and Heartgold are very good. They're much more intense and fun, but only Kanto's battle themes. The only theme from Johto I like more in Heartgold is the rival theme. Like, listen to this part of the song from Heartgold.
Oh, let's go! That's class!
But Heartgold doesn't have as many great songs as Crystal, in my opinion. Crystal has the gym theme, the gym leader theme, the trainer battle theme, the wild Pokemon theme, Ecruteak City! That one just hits way harder in Crystal. Overall, Crystal has the better soundtrack in my opinion, but Heartgold still has some bangers. Anyway, Kanto. Unlike Johto, I personally like every single gym in Kanto more in Pokemon Crystal. Except Blue's, he's the exception. Erica's gym is just really stupid in Heartgold. Surge's gym reused a very annoying gimmick from Generation 1, and Blaine's gym. Oh boy, let's talk about Blaine's gym. So, Cinnabar Island in Generation 1 of Pokemon was a bustling island town. There was a volcano there, no biggie, the whole entire place was still beautiful. 3 years later, in Generation 2, the island is destroyed. All the buildings are gone. No one is there anymore. The volcano annihilated everything. Cinnabar is no more. As someone who knew Cinnabar from Pokemon Blue, I was honestly shocked and upset when I first saw Cinnabar Island in Pokemon Silver and realizing what happened. It was gone. When you first get there in Crystal, Blue is there, talking about how nature is relentless, and that speech he gives has always stuck with me. Take a good look around you. A volcano erupts, and just like that, a whole town disappears. We can go on winning and losing in Pokemon, but if nature so much as twitches, we can lose in a second. When I was younger, I read that and was like really sad. I thought Blaine was dead, and then I found out he wasn't, and I found him in his new cave. And that's when it really hit. He was in this small cave. No one else was there. Not even the man who's there at every previous gym cheering you on. It's a really somber moment in Pokemon that I don't think gets talked about enough. And what did Heartgold do? They give him a whole damn gym, which just really kills the mood and theming of Cinnabar. Seeing a man alone in a cave shows the results of this catastrophe. Giving him a gym with a bunch of trainers under him shows that, you know what, things are fine, keep moving along, maybe climate change is fine. I never liked it. Yes, it's better from a gameplay standpoint, but thematically, it falls flat. At least we have the sad music on Cinnabar and Heartgold, though. That's nice. After you finish the Kanto gyms, it's time to climb Mount Silver to fight the final opponent, one of the greatest final bosses in history, Red. And it's not so bad getting there in Crystal, you know, you just need to go through one dark room, you don't even really have to bring Flash, and then make it to the top. Heartgold, though? Well, you remember Generation 4 of Pokemon? You remember when they added one of the stupidest HMs in existence? Rock Climb? Oh, well, that's here too, except only necessary for Mount Silver. Why? Why add in a terrible gimmick at the very butt of the game, in the final dungeon, where the player needs all 4 move slots on each party member because they're about to experience one of the hardest matches in Pokemon history? I hate Rock Climb. It is dumb. It is stupid. I really just don't like HMs. Like, I love Crystal, but HMs still make me very upset to this day, if you can't tell. I'll give Heartgold one thing. It really nails the atmosphere at the summit. In Crystal, the room for fighting Red is just another cave room. Nothing special. In Heartgold, it's snowing. It's quiet. And then the battle transition? Pure nostalgia. And now we're at Red. Red, who is, of course, the topic of much controversy of Johto's game design. The absurd difficulty spike. In the original games, the Pokemon at the Elite Four were in their 40s. Most of the gym leader Pokemon in Kanto were in their 40s and 50s as well. Red's Pokemon? Most are in their 70s. This is a massive leap in levels. I personally never had an issue with it in Crystal. Pokemon Crystal is honestly a pretty easy game. And if 6-year-old me can beat Red all on my own with level 50 to 60 Pokemon, then I think anyone can. Red's Pokemon were never too tough. Yeah, it's still the hardest fight in the game, but that doesn't say much. In Heartgold, they tried balancing it, and it was just made way worse. There were a number of systems added into Pokemon since the originals, so of course a lot of the fights are going to be harder and more complex. But it made Red pretty damn difficult if you didn't have a few Pokemon in their high 60s, especially since they boosted the levels of Red's Pokemon for whatever reason. They boosted the levels of all the other trainers and gym leaders in the game, so I guess it makes sense, but I thought that this boost was only done to make it so that the game flows better into the final battle with Red. But nope, they also made Red harder. We love a level 88 Pikachu with Volt Tackle, don't we? The systems of Heartgold are better. The physical special split, abilities existing, there are more moves, and the moves that existed had been updated and balanced. Overall, it's a more balanced game. But Crystal's unbalance made the game flow better. You didn't need to grind for hours before Red. You could go fight Blue and then move on to Red with very little issue. The pacing of Heartgold is abysmal at the end, and I'm still baffled at their decision to make Red harder instead of keeping his Pokemon the same level, because that really botched this game's endgame. Heartgold's pacing is infinitely worse than Crystal's. And I think that's my biggest point. Everyone complains about the endgame of Gen 2, but I think they probably only played Heartgold, because Crystal did it pretty well. That's Pokemon Crystal and Pokemon Heartgold, and that's why I prefer Pokemon Crystal. It's without a doubt that Pokemon Heartgold did a lot more for Johto. It expanded the story in the region, it gave your rival Silver a fleshed out story, it added this weird safari zone, it deepened the lore of the Johto legendaries, and I'm grateful for all that, mostly. I still hate the Kimono Chosen One bullshit. And while I think most of these points I'm making are nostalgia-free, I have so much nostalgia for Crystal. I mean, it was one of the first RPGs I beat on my own. It turned me into a massive Pokemon fan. Generation 2 introduced so many of my favorite Pokemon. I have so many fond memories with Johto from when I was a kid. Finding Poliwag by the unknown ruins at night. Doing the bug catching contest in the national park every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, hoping to find a wild Scizor because my cousin told me I could. Riding the SS Anne and stepping into Kanto for the first time. Hunting Chansey in Kanto until late into the night. And beating Red for the first time while I was at my brother's baseball game. Pokemon Crystal is a game I will love forever. It will always be a top 10 game for me. And I'm not sure if any remake of it will surpass this game, simply because of the memories I have tied to it. Everyone has nostalgia with a game that makes their arguments flawed and illogical, and Crystal is that game for me. Although I do think I brought some valid points, someone who grew up with Heartgold will likely feel otherwise. Hey, I'll give Heartgold one thing, okay? The biggest downside in Crystal is that Shuckle is not as viable.